Hi, welcome to my channel where we provide an alternative view to the common narrative. Today I've watched Crosstalk. It's Friday the 17th of February, and a number of items were mentioned which I would like to discuss. It's not I'm talking about Crosstalk per se, but about three concepts that were uttered and I believe are currently misunderstood in the pro-Russian narrative. So if you are interested, please continue watching. Welcome back to the video. The first thing, as I explained, I've watched today an episode of Crosstalk, during which a number of the commentators have made statements or provided a narrative that is quite common around among the pro-Russian commentators. And I believe they are not true, and I cannot really support them, and therefore I'm trying to provide an alternative narrative, or at least a reason and an explanation on why these things are what they are and not what they seem to be. So let's first talk about the first narrative. And I've spoken about it many times before, and that is Zelensky's attitude towards the West. If you look at the Ukrainian attitude toward the West, and you look at the videos and talks that he makes and so on, he's always demanding military assistance. He's demanding that Germany sends panzers. He's demanding that Germany should send fighter aircrafts. He's demanding that the US must provide weapons, artillery, financial support, whatever he needs, whatever Ukraine needs. He's demanding from France and from Spain and from Italy the support, especially military support and equipment. And if one looks at that in isolation, then you ask yourself, but hey, Zelensky is a little bit brass and ungrateful and it would put people off. Because how can you demand that you should actually ask for assistance and be nederig? Be thankful that you will get assistance, and you are actually begging for the assistance of the West and of NATO. And in this program, that is what the pro-Russian commentators talked about. And they specifically said that it puts a lot of people off. And in effect, yes, it does put you off. And if you look at the actions of the the ambassador of Ukraine to Germany, and how they actually badmouth the German chancellor and the president of a Leberwurst and a weakling and all this other stuff, then as a German you would ask yourself, but that we can't allow. How can we support a person like that? I mean, it goes so far that even if you look at all the photos and so on that you can get, you always will find a sort of swastika or a German insignia. And now currently there's a photograph apparently of one of the commanders that has an ISIS flag on his shoulder. Now in normal circumstances this should be a taboo that should actually tell you, but still the West is now going against his own principles and supporting a man like Zelensky and the Ukraine. And they're ignoring the fact of the pro-nationals, Nazi, well, I don't believe in Nazism. I would say they are pro-national, very stubborn, very fanatic about that, and they used some of the German insignias. Doesn't make them Nazis, but, well, I'm not going to argue in this series about this. And why ask yourself why? Why do NATO allow this? Why do they go against their own principles if the Holocaust was such a bad thing and Germany had to endure blame for it and suppressive type of narratives and propaganda in order to let the German people feel bad about what their ancestors has done in the Second World War, alleged has done? And that makes a big question actually about this whole thing. And then I tried to explain it in one of my previous videos. You have to look at the conflict in Ukraine itself. And if you want, you can go back to 2014 when the coup was happening. And then twice, the Ukrainian military has tried to suppress or battle the Donbas militia. And in both of these battles, they lost. And in both of these battles, they led to the Minsk I and the Minsk II agreement in order to so-called save the Ukrainian, official Ukrainian military from a bad defeat. And then for the next 8 years, the US and NATO has trained Ukrainian army up to a supposed standard, the NATO standard. I don't see much about it, or let me rather rephrase it. There's a lot of talk and narrative that says that the guys are not trained and they don't know what they are doing and they have no tactics. And, well, I've talked about it in my previous videos as well. So basically, you know, in terms of how the Ukrainian military behaves, according to the pro-Russian commentators, they are incompetent. They sacrifice their men. They have no strategic capability. They have no tactical capability, etc., etc. And basically, they are a weak force per se. Now, before I just want to say, I don't agree to that narrative either, but it's not what I'm going to address today. But in any case, so in 2022, the 24th of February, no, actually started a little bit earlier. On the 16th of February, the Ukrainian forces prepared themselves for an attack on the Donbas, and they have moved a lot of equipment to the Donbas front, and they were ready basically to attack the Donbas and try to regain it. And they increased their artillery fire and bombardment on the Donbas area, and that is well documented by the OSCE, if I have the right order. And that is the main reason why Putin made a decision and said, that's it. And he started the SMO. And what happened in the SMO? If I've shown you time relapsed in my previous videos, but basically what the Russian army has done is he invaded Ukraine from the Crimea and moved past Kherson city to a little bit north of that. He moved up to the Zaporizhzhia power plant, took possession of that and a part of the Zaporizhzhia Oblast, and gained a lot of ground. Then they did a little bit of fighting and they re-established the land route to the Donbas. They encircled Mariupol and basically were in the process of destroying the so-called most elite and most trained Ukrainian soldiers, the Azov battalion. Then they also entered from the north in the Kharkiv region and approached Kharkiv. And then they had this famous 40-mile long tank and vehicle column on its way to Kiev. And then so you also had the attack of paratroopers, Russian paratroopers and special forces on the Kiev airport. And if you looked at that, that looked very, very impressive, very, very frightening, and very, very threatening to the Kiev regime. And also due to a lot of missile attacks and missile bombardments, precision missiles, the Russian forces destroyed, well, alleged, a lot of Ukrainian hardware in terms of tanks, APGs and other vehicles, artillery pieces, ammunition dumps, etc., etc. So it looked from a military perspective in the middle March that Kiev will be overrun and Ukraine will basically lose the war. So they were in a very precarious position, and that is why they agreed to negotiate. And that's why they came to a near agreement with the Russians in Turkey. And everything was basically more or less agreed. Basically, Mariupol will become part of the Donbass. Crimea would be accepted as Russian territory. Ukraine will not become part too, but they will become part of EU, etc., etc. They were, and that suited the Russians, and they were quite happy to start serious negotiations and terms and conditions based on those proposals by the Ukrainian forces. And then it went back, and a week later, Zelensky said, no, they're going to withdraw from the negotiations. They're not going to settle the matter. And the big question always arises, why? And then we are told that Boris Johnson has basically visited Zelensky, and the assumption is that Boris has convinced Zelensky not to give in, not to settle sign a peace agreement, and then fight basically the Russians. And the Boris then, well, the British were the most fanatic apart from the Americans. And probably Boris Johnson supported, promised the support of providing weapons and financial support and military support and whatever he could promise, as long as Zelensky continued the war and not give in. And I'm sure that that was made on behalf of the UK government and also on behalf of the American government. And then I want us to ask yourself, but why did Zelensky then agree to these terms? Well, one can think only of basically personal enrichment or naivety or some other fanatical belief that Ukraine will be able, with the support of NATO, America, not conquer Russia, but drive the Russian army back. So it's clearly it was a deal that was made between NATO, Boris, and America, and Zelensky. Zelensky will provide the soldiers, the bodies, and the West, in terms of America and Britain, the so-called NATO, will provide the weapons. And that is the deal. And that is why Zelensky doesn't go onto the stage and say, please give me weapons. He says, give me the weapons that you promised. It just leaves out the last couple of words, the promise. But give me the weapons that you promised me that I can continue this war. And I cannot accept 14 tanks, 14 Challenger tanks. I can't wait a year for the 31 Abrams tanks. I need them now. You must send them. And actually, there's also a difference between cultures and how people ask and demand things. Zelensky is a Ukrainian, a little bit more robust maybe than the refined powder kegs, powder people there in America who wants to be a little bit more courted or whatever, be more polite. And Zelensky has no other means. That is in his nature and that is in his culture to bluntly ask for the stuff that was promised. And as the West will see it as antagonistic and demanding and so on, but that is what he's doing. And this is one of the concepts I would like to explain and for you to see for what Zelensky really is. It's not that he might be an, say, onbeschofte, like a brute type of person that has no manners and so on. No, that is in his cultures and he was promised. And now the West must deliver what they were promised. So that is about the first item I would talk, because it's constantly being raised. The second item that was constantly being raised, and not only in the show, but generally in the pro-Russian sphere, and that is the de-industrialization of Germany. All right, there was something like a Morgenthau plan, and you can read out about it, but that was a ridiculous plan that was proposed by a Canadian Jew just after the Second World War, and it means the deindustrialization of Germany and turning Germany into an agricultural land, like a country. I think I've drifted once and so on, but that's not the point. The point here is that it is now being alleged that Germany will deindustrialize due to a shortage of energy, or if you don't want to say a shortage of Russian energy, you will say the high prices. And that will make Germany uncompetitive, and that will basically destroy the economy. Now, how much truth is really in that thing? Yes, there will be casualties. Energy-intensive industries will probably have to move to a different country or block, continent, or they have to find alternative, cheaper energy sources. And there are cheaper energy sources. As I've explained many times, gas is used for heating in Germany, but only 38% of all heating done in Germany is done by gas. Now, if you want to heat glass and so on, you need gas, because gas is a very efficient method of providing heat. So if any gas becomes too expensive, then naturally the gas manufacturers have to move out of Germany. But if then you have to first, okay, let me continue with this first. So if you need have to make fertilizers, you are bound by gas due to as a raw material, a raw input material, because that's where the base material comes from, and then you use the gas to make fertilizers in certain processes. And those companies will probably also have to move, if they have to use. But you can also use coal, because coal is also a biological chain, or polymer chain. It's a complicated chain. It's not basically like CO2. It has a polymer chain that you can break up and then produce certain products. And there's a lot of coal as well in the world and in Germany and stuff like that. So they might find an alternative, maybe not the best alternative, but I'm not a chemical expert. So maybe, but a baker will use electricity. But the problem is that currently electricity is very expensive in Germany. And there's a reason for that, and I already addressed it. The way that the pricing of electricity is calculated is on the highest. You have various forms of electricity generation. You have coal, you have gas, you have nuclear, and you have renewable. And whoever has the highest input, say for some other reason coal became 10 times expensive as it is now, then the cost of coal will determine the overall price of electricity in Germany. And that means that people that generate electricity with gas or nuclear or renewable will make huge profits because the coal price is used as the baseline. In this case, it's the price of gas. And because the price of gas so much, the price of electricity is determined based on the most expensive input cost, and that is gas. So the guys that use coal and nuclear, and they are making huge profits. So it's a system that has to be adapted to the new situation of high gas prices. If you assume that the gas prices will remain this high. And I don't believe that. I believe the gas prices will come down as soon as the market becomes too stabilized. At this stage, the supply lines, the facilities, everything is in turmoil. It is people will take advantage in order to push up the price of gas. I mean, I spoke about ships, LNG tankers that were standing outside Spain, waiting for a better price of gas before they will offload. That's typical. Business is business, money is money. But the German government can make certain adjustments to the tax laws or other laws in order to tax the other energy suppliers against the different things. Or they can negotiate with them and say, listen here, we take on the average price. Or we charge electricity based on the different cost input to each type of input energy, and then we determine an average type of we have an intermediate, and everybody supplies the electricity at a certain price, and we will then adjust it till we get an average, and that average we can sell to the customer. But there are different means of doing it. So basically, there is no reason for Germany to really de-industrialize. If you want to talk about de-industrialization of Germany, then you have to talk about the de-industrialization of the whole of Europe. Not only Germany. The second biggest producers is Italy. Then we have France, Spain. All those people need fuel, energy to run their farms and industries and whatever is necessary, their populations and so on. The whole of Europe will be affected. And as we all know, the biggest money purse in Europe that supports the so-called PIGS countries is Germany. So if Germany loses its income and turnover, then no more money for the PIGS countries. There's Italy and the Spains and the Portugals and Greece and so on. And they will all suffer. But do you ever talk about this now? It's only about the German industrialization. Because some other idiot journalists coined the phrase, and then everybody jumped on that bandwagon, and now it's like it's a fact. No, it's not a fact. It's a fallacy. Companies adapt to the circumstances, and it doesn't always mean movement. They look for alternatives. They make their own plans. So that's the second topic. The third one is talking about NATO as a paper tiger. Now, what does that mean actually, NATO as a paper tiger? Does it mean that NATO is not willing to fight? Does it mean that NATO has no army? Or does it mean that NATO has no military strength? And I'm not totally sure what they mean by a NATO paper tiger. If you look at NATO, the Americans are willing to fight. If you look at the Britons, they are willing to fight. If you look at France, maybe. If you look at Sweden, Norway, and so on, no, they're not that eager, and especially Germany is nowhere eager. But that's only half of the NATO. The other half is, Romania, Poland, Hungary, not that much, but again, Poland, very much. They want to fight. Lithuania, Estonia, the Balkans, although they're very small, they're very eager, very aggressive. Romania, yes. Slovenia, So there are countries that are willing to fight. So, and once it starts, then, you know, the other countries have no choice. They have to join. Then Germany must mobilize, and Netherlands must mobilize, and Belgium must mobilize. And unfortunately, they will all have to do it. But mobilizing a big monstrosity as NATO, that is difficult to do. So you can argue that NATO is a paper tiger now, but force their hand and it will turn into a monster. Whether the willingness is there in terms of certain countries, then I'm not totally sure, and I doubt that. But there are always fanatics, and if you talk about 750 million people, then surely you can have an army of about 100 million or 50 million and get that together. But no army is that big in any case. If you want to look at the weapons, the technology is there. If you talk about the German Leopard tank, it's supposed to be one of the best tanks. The Leclerc tank is not that bad. The Chieftains, I always get confused. Challenger tank, Challenger. And the Abrams tank. There's nothing, yes, there are some individual wrongs. You will always find some weaknesses and some problems with all products and so on. And I mean, these are huge beasts. But at the end of the day, they have to perform their function, that is, provide armor, provide a artillery fire, and take out other tanks. And all of these tanks can do it. And then they have APCs, fighting vehicles, and air defense systems, good air defense systems, make no mistake. Maybe short range, maybe not on the long range like the S-300 and S-400, but they do have it. And then you have the aircraft, the bombers and the fighters and so on, and multi-role fighters and so on, and they're all there. So they have the armament. Maybe it's not in a working condition as they would have liked to do it, but there's a reason for that. There was never a need to spend money. But now they think they need to spend money and they have to invest in that, and they will do it. So now Germany, France, and those countries in a year's time, 2 years' time, will look at, if nothing escalates under normal circumstances, their military will look a lot different. So NATO does have the weapon systems. And they might not have the S-300 or S-400, but they have different tactics, different type of warfare conducting, different strategies, and we don't know how these will match up against the Russians, the Russian doctrine. But once it would have started, then every army would have adapted in any case to the circumstances, because all wars are fluid, and no war can be compared with another war, a previous war, because technology always changes. So from military war, from a weapon system, and forget about the story that the militaries are depleted, their stocks are, no, they are not depleted. They are all depleted of their retired junk. They got rid of all their scrap stuff. They didn't provide the latest technologies, the latest tanks. So the military capability that they more or less had, okay, given the circumstances, that they were not all operational. Like I said, there were only 4 aircrafts, German Air Force, that were fighting capability. The rest all had problems. And they had about 100 and something aircrafts, fighter aircrafts. But let's assume those are all right. So they didn't give the latest technology. Neither did the Americans. They did give some, which they could afford. I mean, if you have 800 or 900, what's the Paladin? Is it the Paladin? Self-propelled artillery piece, then surely you can give maybe 50 away. And it wouldn't make such a big dent in your fighting capability. So they do have the weapons. You just have to look a little bit at it differently. And then we can look about the industrialization or the preparing for war. the industrial support. That's a big thing currently. The West is running out of ammo. No, they are not running out of ammo. The European countries didn't have ammo from the start point because they were never prepared for a artillery type of fighting war. They never expected the Russians to really invade, and they were never prepared for that. The Americans did provide a lot of weapons, but again, not enough to deplete all their stocks. They still have enough for themselves. And if you look about the Stinger missiles, you know, it was a general principle in America that they wanted to get rid of the Stingers for the simple reason is they were afraid it will fall in the hands of terrorism and so on. So the whole use of the whole principle of shoulder launch anti-aircraft systems was being scaled down, if you wanted to. The javelins have been replaced effectively by what? If I have the again in law, is that what's the anti-tank shoulder launched? I don't have all the abbreviations. Every army has their own abbreviations. And if you look at the air defense systems, what do they have? They have actually air-to-air missiles converted to ground-launched missiles. So the technology and everything sits on site. Yes, they are very expensive. Yeah. But in a time of war, that money doesn't really play, and mass volume and production that kind of. So the point here again is that they have the ammunition. They have given a percentage way, maybe 15% of their storage, and now they call it that's depleted and so on, but now they are ramping up production. And they have the industry. We are talking about 750 million people. We're looking at a combined GDP of, say, 40 trillion. That's a hell of a lot more than what the Russians can mobilize, or the Chinese. So I'm not sure why we always have this underestimation of the NATO. They might not show the willingness now, but if, unfortunately, the reason why there will be a World War III, it's not because everybody wants it. It's going to happen by chance, by accident. Not really by accident, by a miscalculation. The Russians are not reacting. The West is interpreting as a weakness. They're continuing of escalating weapons delivery, and at one stage they're going to miscalculate. All the Russians will decide, that's it. Red line crossed. Here we go. So it's not a question of, I'm going to make war against you and you're going to make war against you. No, it's not going to happen like that. But once that happens, the whole machinery gets into motion. You will see industries will be converted in record time. Money priorities will be spent differently for change. And the problem is that once NATO gets loose and this whole war starts, don't think that China will sit around and do nothing. They will have no choice but to enter the war on the side of the Russians. Because if Russia is defeated, they next. And it's better to fight together than lose individually. And then we will have a big mess. Yeah, and I just want to say again, there might be a breakup of NATO, yes. This Northern Pipeline, the pressure on Germany. Germany has been bamboozled in delivering the tanks. Like I said, the clerks, the French have now reviewed the thing, and the Americans have just promised it to trick Germany into providing these leopards, but they're not going to send the Abrams tanks. And now Germany has committed itself, and, well, the evil Germans. So for that one reason, Germany, with the blow-up of the Nord Stream pipeline, etc., and the unwillingness to fight, and etc., they might withdraw from NATO. But if you look carefully and if you read carefully, the Americans are already trying to have a military alliance with Poland and the other Balkan countries and some of the other countries itself. So they are already preparing for an alternative to NATO in Europe. For the willing people, the willing fighters. Because America doesn't want to send their own people, they want to have proxy forces. And the Poles are ready. In any case, I thought I would address these couple of items because it is the wrong narrative. It is a constantly abuse of, not an abuse, but a misunderstanding of the principles that are really at play here. Or rather, that is my opinion and how I see it as an alternative viewpoint of the common narrative. In any case, that's it for today. If you like what you heard and you haven't subscribed, subscribe now. Tell your friends to subscribe. Press the notification bell. Leave a comment. Well, until next time then. Cheers.